Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll continue on with my read of the Complete Eightball, the new edition out from Fantagraphics, and we're up to issue 10 by now. With issue 9, I left off saying how happy I was that Clowes was ending things on a seemingly more positive note, and I was hoping that the series continued in the less cantankerous vein as it went. And I think this issue has some payoff of that. And then I think issue 11 from me flipping forward is going to be even better. So excited about where this was heading after a rough start. So right out the gate, you just get a couple things that are childish Clowes. This one here, this grip glutz, this feels again quite a bit like a Gilbert Hernandez thing where it's just going into, I don't know, like someone with grotesque sexual preferences, is a little throwaway comic strip basically. I like that Clowes is just developing all of these characters that he can come back to or not. I quite enjoy this format that he has of just being able to kind of do what's ever on your mind. You have some kind of continuing story going on that people can come back to, but then there's room for play in there. I think as an artist that would be a lot of fun, and I think that would be a fun format to play with, is to have this kind of self anthology book that he's got going on. I think there's a lot of power in that, and that lets you have like this. I do not like this at all, but that can be like a throwaway strip. Someone will like it, someone won't, and they can move on to the rest of the content of the book. Or just like, you have a one-off idea for an illustration like this, that's great. This is great use for it. I'm totally going to skip over like a velvet glove cast in iron, except for a couple panels. I don't really have much to say about it. This is the final episode of it, and I don't think that the conclusion, wraps it up in a way where it changes my opinion on it just being a kind of, this one even more so just seems like he's really making it up panel by panel. I did notice that there's a scene here with Bill Clinton, and he's right in front of it. It looks like Clowes with his leg up on a desk with no pants on, and he's talking about well, they're calling Bill Clinton a cocksucker, and this is in 1993. So I just think this whole two panels here is kind of an eerily prophetic, given where the Clinton presidency went. There's actually a bit of notes that I'm going to show in a minute where Clowes was saying he was working on this issue before he even knew who had won this election, the 1993 election. So Clinton coming in 94. So he didn't even know whether it was going to be Bush, Clinton, or Perot, and he picked Clinton and got that right. So that's an extra bit of prophecy there, I think. And then you get this weird like dream sequence that kind of explains the backstory, and I don't know, none of it adds up to me. It's got some more Charles Burns kind of stuff, and then basically it ends with this kid has been dictating a story to someone, and they make what appears to be a real snuff film, and then like the story's over and you never really get any answers. So I don't know, that's the continuing thing for the first 10 issues, and to me it's throwaway. It must have been a heck of a lot of fun for Clowes to make, and I imagine he probably learned quite a bit about himself, because those type of surreal psychedelic explorations are usually informative to the author, but I don't know, it's up to the audience to interpret how they will, and I just not too prone to interpret that kind of thing. I noticed that he had moved to the Bay Area and was sending people to Berkeley, California, Shattuck Avenue, old stomping grounds. So that's kind of cool from my days in undergrad. Then we have another two like really kind of grotesque one-off strips. They're both using duo shade paper, which is strange. It's like an old material. I'm sure most of our viewers know what duo shade is, but it's a strange look for Clowes. And in his notes in the back that I'll look at, he complains about it looking ugly, feeling like he got a broken piece of duo shade or something. I don't know, man. This is what it's supposed to look like. It's just a strange look to combine with Clowes' art. I think is why he didn't like it. But I actually kind of like the look of it. It's a real good choice for this here. It makes this look extra gross. I've always thought duo shade looked kind of gross. I don't know why. Like those old Ninja Turtles that have it look gross to me. And so here it looks gross as well. And I think it's well chosen because this right here is about Dickie, who's a disgusting old acne fetishist. And that's nasty and disgusting, but also like I respond to that because I've known people throughout my life that like obsessively want to pick zits like this character does, can't help it. People in my family, that relatives that would like if I had a zit, they'd be like, "Come here, I gotta get it," and it's like, no, it's so fucking gross. Um, but I've always wondered, because I've seen people have such a visceral need to squeeze a zit. I've always figured it must be tied to a sexual fetish somehow, but too scared to like type that on the internet and look for it because I really don't want to know. I don't want to see it. But it seems that Clowes had the same kind of realization that someone probably fetishizes over that. Then we have a one-off here, Zubrick's pal Poggy Bait. I don't know. That's just another one-off kind of joke thing. Then you have the typical cranky Clowes doing a message to people of the future, and he's just like, it's saying, don't read this, so I'm not supposed to have read this. And then he basically just kind of goes on about being a cartoonist, and then throws himself under the bus, for some of his own behavior, and then basically pleads with them to don't let me die. But it is kind of growing out of the pure cranky cantankerous irony of some of the earlier ones, and I don't know, this one seemed a little bit more thoughtful to me, especially that at the end it's about like, look, the whole reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to extend myself, I'm trying to make myself live forever. But it's still like a comic artist versus everyone else type of feeling that you typically get in a Clowes stuff. But I do like this drawing of him as an old man too. And then this must be, I don't know what this was, because there's a little book that looks like this stuffed in here later, this modern cartoonist. So it looks a bit like that, Behind the Eight Ball, and this is number 1. I don't know. It says limited edition private printing, printed with Ditko's tears, which is kind of rude. But then it's selling for, it looks like $500, but not for resale. So I don't know. I don't know if this actually came out as a little pamphlet, because it's only a few pages, or if this is just an insert that they made. But this is obviously Clowes now writing commentary on each story from back then. And it's interesting because I don't know if it's just age or it's just difference in writing versus cartooning, but it's a very different voice. It's not at all the presentation that's in the comic strip. So I think some of it too is just like, when you're going to the comic strip, there's some kind of entertainment that's expected, and maybe that's where his whole persona came from, is he was building up like this comedic persona where he gets to complain about everything. I don't know if that's what it was. But a couple things I don't normally read these, but for whatever reason, these ones were interesting to me. Maybe because I had some speculations, and it's interesting to find out that those speculations, for the most part, were accurate. So here he refers back to the mullet gag, the short hair on top, long in back gag that shows up a couple times, and I've commented on. And I've wondered if we didn't have the term mullet yet, and he confirms that the term mullet didn't exist when he made the story, or at least he was unaware of it. So that was February 1990 that 8 Ball 2 came out. Right here, this is the kind of like ashamed comic cartoonist thing that shows up in like Chris Ware and Dan Clowes and all the guys from this era that is just a turnoff to me. It shows up so much in their comics that they're talking so much about how embarrassed they are about being a cartoonist, or the fact that they're trying to recover cartooning from being an embarrassing thing, that it just becomes embarrassing again. And it's like, just go be someone who's not embarrassing. But he notes here, and you get a hint at like how deep-seated this is for him, that he was on an airplane reading an old Harvey Comics, Richie Rich, that he had gotten rid of Marvel and DC and was getting into old EC, Underground, and National Lampoons, except he still really liked the old Harvey comics. And he was on a plane reading Richie Rich, and an old lady glanced over and asked, "Is that pornographic?" And he says that he was so ashamed of what it really was, a comic for 5-year-olds, that he said yes. And that's embarrassing to me, and it should be embarrassing. Like, just say no, I'm reading, like, Richie Rich or whatever. No big deal, mind your own business. Like, you're not reading pornography, no big deal. Here we have a crazy story that is absolutely terrifying for me, because Clowes is obviously a expert at production, and he's talking about how he used to have to do the color separations by hand with his Rubylith and all that stuff, versus issue 6 being the second issue that got scanned and then colored digitally. And with issue 7, he's saying this was the second issue that we did that. And on this splash page, so Clowes says that on page 3, on this splash page, this character's head, when he got the comic back, looked wrong to him. He remembered thinking that it looked too short and fat. And he called up Kim Thompson at Fantagraphics and was like, what's going on? Why did my art get shrunk? And Kim responded to him like, hey, you're crazy. What are you worrying about? And then they went on to find out that the printer had in fact shrunk the art, but only on the, quote, only on the y-axis, to make the indicia fit better at the bottom, to make this. So they had shrunk this whole head just to make this fit better, and they had done this without the artist's permission. And Clowes obviously is someone who's gone through and designed his books to be exactly the way they want them. So that's the kind of thing that, like, when me and Sean talk a lot about print quality and that kind of thing, it's like you can do everything right on your end, like Clowes did. Clowes is a real expert technician, does everything perfect, and that's why his books always look so good. And then you can still get the printer doing something stupid like shrinking the head. Now, I think Clowes does do long faces, like Midjourney is doing right now with the big foreheads and long chins. So I can imagine this being shrunk actually looking fairly naturalistic, but still, that's not the printer's prerogative to make those choices for the artist. So that's kind of crazy and scary, and given the issues that I've had on some of my books with printers, understandably frustrating. Here in the notes for 8-Ball issue 9, he tells this absolutely psychotic story. A lot of things happened during the making of this issue. I got divorced and went on a long road trip where I met my future wife, Erica, who's depicted in a gag cartoon on page 15. My plan was to gain, and I'm sure this is just a joke, but it's still so evil. My plan was to gain control of her trademark so she'd have to go through all kinds of legal hassles if she wanted to break up with me. I get it. Having been married and divorced myself, like, especially if he was fresh off of divorce, that's the kind of mindset you would be in. But that is a totally psychotic thing to do. And I hope that was actually going through his mind at the time, because it's pretty gross and reprehensible, but in a funny way. So that's the end of issue 10. It's got, I'm assuming this was the photo on the back cover of the issue, not on whatever this little insert is. It's him at a desk. This is really cool. It kind of looks like all those old Hal Foster, Alex Raymond images where you just get them like really lovingly, and he looks so careful here. I'm sure he wasn't really drawing, but that's kind of cool. It's very different from everything else. So I'm really feeling a shift in the series. I think this issue, actually issue 9 was like the crux point, but issue 10 kind of leans into it. And then here you see with issue 11 that it says 8 bonus pages, all new, all now, taking on a new format for very mature readers. So this here, and then flipping through it, I see that the Velvet Glove story's over. We're going to move on into some new stories, some new characters, maybe a generally new approach, I hope. And then it also looks like we're going to get the first Ghost World episode in the next book. So I'm really looking forward to see how the series evolves at this like halfway point where he rethinks it. I kind of see him rethinking his own approach a little bit, I think, in some of how the last 2 issues have gone. So I'm really hopeful for where the next couple issues go and how the rest of this book will play out. So I know it's been kind of a rough road for me and probably for people following along to get to this point because I've been struggling with my ability to enjoy some of this content, but I am liking it more and more and more, and that's why I wanted to do these episode by episode, because I kind of knew my opinion about early Clowes. I hadn't seen it all, but I also knew that I like it as it grew later, and so I really wanted to track that evolution. So I kind of expected that this is how it was going to go. Maybe I pre-biased it too much. I don't know, but we'll see where it goes from here. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for following along with this. For the people that have stuck with me, I really appreciate it. If you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel, the best ways to support us are through our Patreon. We have a couple different tiers with different levels of engagement and exclusive features, so we really appreciate that. And then the best thing you can do is to support the books that Sean's putting out through Living the Line Publishing. So we'll take a look at a couple of those now. Sala Niyalo, Path of the Shades by Clarence Doss is a really cool ongoing project that Living the Line will be producing. Clarence is a PhD student from Fiji who's studying the myths of Fiji for his doctoral thesis. And part of that study project is that he's producing these comics. They're kind of like Hellboy, where there's these little short stories that capture all of these different mythologies. But then he's using that to wrap the project into his doctoral thesis and then provide educational material where people can come to these comics. You know, they don't have to read his PhD thesis. They can come to the comics and get a more consumable version of the mythology of Fiji. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.